go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to our September Fireside Chat. For those of you new to Digital Square, we support innovators, governments, and health leaders by, oh goodness, I'm sorry, by supporting adaptable digital health tools, and we support tools by posting sessions like this. So just a few quick house rules. We are recording this session. It will be posted on our wiki in a few days. We ask that if you have questions, please raise your hand and keep yourself muted unless you're speaking. We are happy to call on you, or if you want to throw your questions into chat or in our Google Doc that I'll share in just a second. Happy to facilitate that as well. So with that, I will turn it over to our Fireside expert, Jose. He is he has been working on FHIR standards since 2009 and helped start the HL7 FHIR working groups in Belgium and Portugal. So with that, over to you.
Thank you, Brenda. Yeah, so this is an open discussion on several topics. So just to give some background on what we have been looking at, we had a couple of sessions where we started presenting. So it's not really a formal FHIR training, but we just had some discussion around the basics of FHIR, then the basics of, so we had also the basics of FHIR profiling, which is how can you make FHIR work in your own setting, or how can you adapt FHIR. We had also another session on terminologies, which is one of the great things that FHIR does, is the handling of terminologies and putting some management on top of the use of terminologies in interfaces. And we had a session on just putting it in practice. So we made an implementation guide, which is the standard way of documenting FHIR specifications. And that brought us to where we are today. So we had a community of people that are more and more engaged in making FHIR specifications, in following the good practices, not only using FHIR the right way, but especially. Sorry, I could not understand that. Was that a question? Nope. Okay, so yeah, we had some ideas on, we had some discussions on how to make good use of FHIR, not only the technology, which is quite powerful, quite interesting, but also the ecosystem that we have. So there's many tools out there, and especially the power of the community. So the community that's strongly engaged in doing better and better specifications, doing more and more standardization. And we have this community that is growing, and that's the reason for us to join whenever we can, to just openly discuss. With that, and setting just the scene like that, I would like to see if people have preferred topics to discuss, or any ideas, or any burning issues, or any future issues that people feel may be burning, or things that we haven't heard about, or current projects, or cool ideas, or things that we should discuss. This is an open discussion. It's like we are all sitting having some drinks over the fireplace, and so I would invite everyone to just bring out questions, concerns, or ideas, please. I'll let the awkward silence work for itself.
Hey, Jose, can you hear me?
Yes.
Ah, fantastic. So I have a quick question from my side. I know recently the WHO released I'm going to get the acronym wrong, I think it's the DCC, around the vaccination certificates. You were involved in that work, correct?
Minorly. So it was mostly Carl Leitner that was doing the technical analysis of that. I did some checks, but it was growing quite fast for me to catch up. I think I understand the basics. But yeah, if you have any questions on that, I'm
just curious, based on the sessions that you've done over this time, the implementation guides and the FHIR resources and that, how is that playing out in that particular space right now? And if we were looking at it from an implementer's perspective, what would be some of the key things that you'd want to make sure they're familiar with from a FHIR perspective to be able to work with that?
That's a very good thing. So thanks. That sets a good tone. So let me just share my screen, and that's a good thing to do. I thought you meant something specific about that one, but on the content I cannot comment too much. But on the methodology, I definitely can. And Fazila, yes, if you allow me, then we will just answer your or give you the word in a few seconds or a few minutes when we are going through this. Let me share my screen. So this is, I believe this. So this is the digital certificate for vaccination. This is an implementation guide, as some of you that were in the sessions have seen this. I will just use this to underpin the key things that we have discussed and how that methodology and those things that we have discussed in our sessions, they feed into this. So this is one application of our methodology. So this is an implementation guide. It's a standard way of representing specifications in FHIR, where we can choose the content, and in this case the content was what are the business requirements, what are the models in exchange. So this is a bit more of a detailed specification of what we have there. And the so for example, if I go to the content profile, so this is actually the content. So this is the FHIR profiled artifacts, let's say the technical specifications for the content itself. So this is actually the core of the specification of this. But around this came, first of all, this approach. So we have an implementation guide, and in our implementation guide, we try to capture the business requirements. I don't know if this, yeah, so some business requirements or some key concepts that we use. This is just narrative. For those of you in the FHIR implementation guide session, you will remember that we did some narrative. We added some narrative to the implementation guide. This is it. We can add any sorts of narrative. In this case, we chose to store the concepts. So just the definitions of the concepts as they are used in this document, so that people that read this, they know exactly what they are reading. So from a business perspective. I think there should be something about or not yet on the functional requirements. I don't know if I'm looking at the right branch. So the use cases, they are also documented, and this is actually some good practices that we are trying to adopt. Or I'm happy to see this here because I will copy this idea. A table with the use cases, and they are identified. So this means that we can make versions of this. We can see that the use case is now additional, or the use case number 1 is changed, or we deprecate the use case number 1. So I'm really happy to see this in this table here. But as you see, it's just one way of structuring the content. There's also some deployment notes. So about security and privacy, well, we don't have it yet. Testing, there would be a test plan here whenever we have that the test data there. There's a technical thing like this is the downloads. Most of it comes out of the box with the implementation guide. And there's the technical artifact index. So all the things that the technical content of this profile. In terms of methodology, it follows exactly what we have been discussing before. It's not only about making FHIR profiles, it's about having a process for saying, this is our business requirements. From this, we derive our logical or our data models. And from our data models, then we derive our specifications, our technical specifications. While doing that, we should keep track of why is this field mandatory? What does this field even mean? And what does the object vaccination certificate mean, and what does it contain? Does it contain certificate for one registration of administration for one event, or is it the certificate of, let's say, presumed immunity to a disease? All those questions, they are on the business side. So before we start the technical implementation, we go through those also in this implementation guide, and then we really follow the same methodology. We put the technical specifications as a function of our functional specifications. We keep all of that in sync. We also put some examples in place just to make sure that whatever we do, having an example really forces us to think, did I think this thoroughly? Did I make any mental shortcuts? Is this clear? What is the difference between that and that value? So it really forces us to have some validation ourselves, some effort to validate our own specifications. And then the publications, the generation of documentation, it comes kind of out of the box. And I would just like to point that So with every implementation guide, you can choose the layout, you can choose the menu to some degree, and everyone will have this box. So this is the continuous build. So this is why it's still in continuous build. This is based on the current version of this GitHub repository, and this GitHub repository is what we have here. Here. Also the same methodology. The work that we are doing is we put all of this knowledge, so all of the definitions, the tables with the use cases, everything goes into one implementation guide repository, so one GitHub repository, so that people can collaborate. So there's now 8 contributors to this, and this is how we roll. So this is how we set up this. The tool set is out there. So if you go and catch up with the implementation guide session that is recorded on our blog, you will see how this works and how you can make your own. The methodology is also kind of explained there. We start with the functional side and then we go into the technical side. We make some examples. So all of that is explained there. There's a walkthrough to that. And then the rest becomes a matter of collaboration. So if I'm not sure of what this means, or if I need use cases and I'm the technical person and I'm not able to provide those use cases, so I need to ask some people, then my job is to type them down or to ask someone to open the GitHub repository and help me clarify the use cases. And it becomes a matter of collaboration. The advantage of having this in a controlled repository like GitHub, and that comes out of FHIR, is that whenever someone makes a change, so if I were to make a change here, this would immediately trigger that this gets republished if everything is okay. But if I make a mistake, then I will be loudly notified of that mistake, because one of the good things also about FHIR is that whenever we produce something, the specifications are computable, as you know. So the computers can check if that specification is correctly done, and if not, there's a validation phase that says, hey, this is not allowed. So for example, if we say patient gender is mandatory, and if we have one example where the patient gender is not there, then the system says, hey, there's an inconsistency here, I'm stopping, or the publication stops because until you fix this issue. Carl, I don't know if this brings those together, the things that we are doing, and for example, this as an example of the methodology.
Yeah, I think this is fantastic. I think it's also quite interesting to see how this all plays out, considering that this was released recently, and I think there's going to be some movement towards seeing adoption of these tools in different technologies, in global goods particularly.
Yeah,
so
I think also great. Just one more comment on this. If we're talking about now about the deployment, so as you see, the deployment will have some basic stuff at this moment, but maybe what happens is that if I want to create my own version of the WHO certificate, and if I have to to add some localization or something, or some local codes, whatever happens, if I want to do some of those, maybe I need to do that locally. So I just set up my own implementation guide and I do my own things and I put my country flag on there. That could be possible. I don't know if that's desirable, because we're talking about a world standard. So maybe it's not good to mess with it too much. But most important or most interesting in that sense could be the deployment. So we can add more things like, okay, for deployment, maybe there's a reference server somewhere, or here's the test server, or here's some more data that you can do, or here's the test plan for you to test this locally, or there's already some examples of this. Like, as you see, there's quite some examples in Arabic, in Chinese, etc. So maybe people want to contribute more, or maybe people want to have this on their own side, so that one country wants to say, this is the reference implementation or the specification. I want to take all the definitions, but not all the examples, and I want to put it on my server because I want my developers to play with it. So I think we'll also have some further efforts soon in deployability of this, to make it really as much plug and play as possible. FHIR is really awesome at that, so we are going to take as much advantage of those tools as we can. With that, if no more comments on this, so we can always go back to this. Fazila, please.
Yes, I have a question. I mean, for example, it's still about on the digital vaccine cert. So when you're talking about it must conform to FHIR standards, HL7 FHIR standards. So especially countries like ours, which we are very early in FHIR and we may not have expertise. So who is going to validate that this cert is conforming to FHIR standards? Is there a international body that can do that?
There is two answers to that. The one that I prefer not to, yes, there is always a FHIR community that can help and validate these things. So there's the chat.fhir.org. If you're not in the chat.fhir.org, here it is. If you're not in here, please make an account. It's really, really helpful for you. So there is always a community that you can ask for advice. There is also, as we talk about deployments, there will also be entities, maybe like IHE, maybe others, that are going to provide some testing infrastructure for this. So you can say, I want to certify my system. So certification is something that can be done. And there will be, I'm assuming with COVID, there will not be a big gap in the market for entities that want to validate the certificates. The other answer to this, and this is the one that I strongly encourage to always explore or to always keep in mind, is that specifically to your question, we are stating that this is conformant with the FHIR-based standard. That's what we are stating here. The good thing is that the way that FHIR is done, it's in layers. And if you go also to the, so Fazila, I would invite you to go to our blog and see if you don't want to go through all the videos, see the FHIR implementation guide session. That is really interesting. So yeah, basically walk them backwards. So if you start with the latest one, which is the FHIR implementation guide, and then go backwards, I think for details, then I think that will be useful, because FHIR is done in layers. We have the base layer of FHIR, which is the international layer of FHIR, to which every system has to be compatible. They have no choice. And if I make an implementation guide like this one based on FHIR, there is an implicit and strong requirement there that whatever we do here is by definition compliant with FHIR. Otherwise, it would not be published. The validators that are in place will say, no. If, for example, let's say, here's a concrete example, still on patient gender. In FHIR, patient gender has only 4 values, male, female, other, and unknown. It does not support things like gender identity. So if someone wants to say, well, but in my country, I want gender to be a gender identity, so I will add another value. Don't worry, the first time you try to do it, the system will explode in your face and will say, you cannot do this. This is not allowed. And then you reached out to the community and say, oh, wait, there's an extension for that, exactly for that purpose. But the fact that you have a valid publication is evidence that you really are conformant with the base standard. So all of that is done for us. Data type validation, all those things, we don't need to worry too much, because it's done by the publication itself. And when you set up a server, if you set up your own server, of course, then you have to read the entire specification. But what most people are doing is, well, we have reference servers available. We have open source servers that we can use for our purpose and to customize for our purposes. So we don't want to redo that logic and spend 5 years making that server. We just use the server that's available off the shelf. That one is compliant with the basic FHIR level, the basic FHIR layer, or the core FHIR layer. And if we say, well, but I want the Malaysia layer on top of this, fine. It's still the same server, but just adopts additional constraints and additional specifications that are specific to Malaysia. But you don't have to redo the tools, and you don't have to worry about the compatibility on the lower layers. It's really a layered approach. And as long as you say, this one is based on FHIR version 4, then the system takes care of everything, of all the validation for you. Does this answer the question?
Thank you.
Thank you. Interesting question. Any other ideas, questions, topics?
So you mentioned FHIR testing, and you framed it in this particular area. So, and now with the connectathons, maybe it's a good idea just to walk through how we go about writing particular tests around FHIR, or just point us to it and recap the idea of how tools would be able to go and get FHIR tested.
Okay, so about FHIR testing, so FHIR itself, so the FHIR specification and the FHIR derivatives, so the things that we build on FHIR, they are tested in the connectathon. So this week we had a FHIR connectathon where we were testing some implementations, so vendors and institutions can go to a FHIR connectathon and say, I want to test this part of FHIR, or I want to confirm that this part of FHIR, or I want to see if my adaptations of FHIR, if they should be considered valid for other people, and therefore they would be good candidates to extend the base FHIR specification. So if everyone in the world has a requirement and that requirement is not in FHIR, that's a very good sign that maybe it should be in FHIR in the first place. And there's a couple of success stories of that. So there's an event where people can come together and focus on specific topics. For example, this topic was also checked in the connectathon. And the connectathon has two purposes. One is to validate if vendors can easily implement this. So basically, I could say this as connectathon helps us see how far we are from a real plug and play, fully working specification. We can see it like that. In terms of certification and in terms of validation for specific purposes, there are a few things that we can do. So first of all is, of course, if you join the connectathon, you are making sure that you are testing the thing that is being published by FHIR. But if in one country one makes one specification, the testing process, and I'm trying to put lots of thoughts together. First thing is the same. We define a testing process, so I think that would be a good thing. So as part of the development process, if you are in your country or in your company or in your system or organization, if you are saying this is the system that I'm going to do, as part of the good IT practices, when you say that, you should say, and this is how it's going to be tested. These are the criteria without which systems cannot pass. For example, you don't have to worry about patient gender being one of those values, but you can say that throughout the life cycle of a patient, the patient gender cannot change unless there is something else. I don't know, I'm just making this up now, but you can make those rules. And to make those rules, you can say, well, if I'm going to implement those rules on my server, then I have to do some coding myself. That's my system, it's not the FHIR specification. Or if I'm going to say this extension is mandatory, then I'm going to do that on the server and on the specification. So we can state these things. And then there's a part of saying, for everything that we produce, every specification that we produce, we have a testing. So far, so there's testing tools, there's test data, as you see here, there's example instances that can be used as test data. You can do this. So basically, if I have a server available, I can actually throw this Chinese immunization recommendation example at that server. And if the server is configured with the DDCC, with the WHO guidelines for certificates, the server itself will tell me if this is a valid resource or not, if it's a valid instance or not. So we don't have to worry about that validating the content too much. But what is really important, in my view, is to set up the process and criteria. So when we say, so if I look at these examples, I don't know if every country should test all the languages, because that might be a requirement. That let me see if I find a small country here. I don't find a small country here. It's only the main languages. But if I have, for example, the Dutch language here, for example, if I would have it, what does it mean? Does it mean that Dutch systems only have to understand Dutch, or does it mean that that Dutch systems Dutch systems have to understand Dutch and German and French and Danish, maybe because those are the countries that border it. So there is a space for defining criteria. So when we make a specification, we should always say, what criteria do we consider important for this to be valid? And it's in this level. So if you update a record, what might change, what might not change? If you have an example in one language, does it mean that you support only that language or other languages, and how to test that? So if we have some text that says criteria number 1, the system should respond to a certificate in Spanish in the same way that it responds to a certificate in Dutch, except of course the text will be different, or maybe there's some translation or some transcoding there. If this is written down as criteria, it is really an agile and DevOps good essential practice to just say this is how it should do, and this is what you should do to test it at home or in your company, etc. So if you have those criteria, the next thing you have to do is to feed those criteria. So if you say, yeah, the system in one language shall respond to the other languages, then you should provide examples in those languages. And in FHIR, there's a thing which is not here yet, which is a FHIR test script. Show it, which of course it is another resource. And it's a way to structure also the tests. So for those of you more familiar with the test procedure, the test script pretty much contains a computable specification of a test script, which is what resources do we have, what are the variables that we use here, what is the setup, like initially populating the server, and then what is the testing itself, and how, after testing, how do you bring down the server. So there are some resources in FHIR. Sadly they are not very used, but there are tools that use it, and one of them is, I can show it to you. If you want to test your server, there is a called not called Inferno. Sorry, I forgot the name of the tool. Touchstone. So there is a server, and most of these tools, they are open source, they are available to you. There's also the IHE Gazelle, which is also something that you can use. So there are tools that help you certify your systems. We are still growing in maturity on how easy it is to document test cases and how easy it is to validate those test cases without having to do lots of manual coding. But there are tools here. I'll just put this one on the chat for anyone that wants to get more familiar with this tool. But yeah, so my core recommendation there, if I have one, would be think of testing as a first-class citizen in whatever you do. So if you say, I'm going to make specifications, but I'm training myself also to do this. It's quite difficult. As you're in the creative process, you have to think of how am I going to test this? And it's really helpful if you are doing this kind of test-driven development. So whatever you do, see how this is going to be tested, whether implementation is there or not yet, make the test cases, and after a pool of test cases is big enough, then you set up the process. And just to wrap up on this, the process would be defined by the local needs of the country. I can just mention one example. If you have one specification, if you want to say, I want everyone to test, or everyone in my country to test that specification, then you have to set up the test tools. Most likely you have to set up the test server. You have to set up the process and say, how do we allow people to test? Is it in 1 week, everyone comes here to test and then we certify everything? That's very good for manual testing. But if you have more automated testing, which is also something that can be done better in FHIR, then you can say, well, then we don't have to welcome people to our facilities or to a virtual event and have them testing. We can just send them this information, and that package of information is the test cases, the test instructions, etc. And then you say, okay, on Monday or on that day, you have a slot. Please throw your things against our server, and we will check if you're doing okay. That doesn't prevent you from doing it the week before just for trial on your own server, but on Monday, our server is going to be open for you. So there's a couple of techniques that we are exploring there. But I think, to summarize, sorry for talking too much and too fast, but that's usual. Sorry. Two things about testing. Whenever you do specifications, capture the test data and ideally the test criteria and the test scripts for that criteria. So you should say, I'm making this field mandatory. Okay, I'm going to make one test case where this has to fail, because if the field is missing, the server has to tell me that it is failing. So think of that testing when you are working with your content, then wrap it up also in the implementation guide, make the criteria clear. And on the other side, set up the process for testing. So what process do you want in your country? Do you want a synchronous testing setup, or do you want a synchronous test event where everyone comes together and meets for a certification, and decide what you want to do with this? I think we could have one of our sessions, one of our future FHIR sessions in dedicated to testing alone, because that is growing in maturity quite fast, and we might want to have something to demonstrate soon. Yeah, if for the moment, if you think of those things, I think those are already very good steps. Keep testing whenever you develop something, and think of how you want to test it in your country, in your organization, and or in your own company. Carl, I don't know if all squeezed, if that provides good information or not to your question.
Yeah, thank you. I think that covered all the things I was hoping to tease out of you in that space.
Thank you. So more ideas, more stuff. Does anyone have a burning point with FHIR? Does anyone have an issue that they don't know how to get solved? Does anyone want to say where they are in their local FHIR adoption? Is anyone having trouble even to get started? These are the kind of things that we are here to discuss. So go ahead.
I would like to share something.
Please.
Yeah, we are embarking on a health information exchange platform project next year, and we are doing it as a pilot in one of the states for the entire state. We have had many other projects many years ago, but many have failed. So this is like a new revived project. So I think this is the first time we are using the FHIR standards. Much earlier, we were using the HL7 and CDA format for the discharge summary and so forth. So it's exciting, but it's also scary because we don't know much about it. But we know it's the way to go. And we are learning and learning. In fact, thank you for sharing the blog site. I have sent it to the team to read about it. And yeah, we are really hoping that next year we can move on with our project. And also about the international patient summary, we are not sure how is it different from that CDA discharge summary on HL7, the earlier version. So that's another thing we really need to look at. Yeah, that's what's happening right now in Malaysia.
So, first of all, great. Thanks for sharing that you are embarking on this. The good news is that there is a lot of people that are on the same step, a bit further and a bit beyond, behind you. So that's really a bit beyond and a bit behind. So you will definitely have a large community to share those experiences with, and we are also here to help. So these sessions and reaching out to the FHIR community. To be honest, if you ask in it, so the FHIR chat, if you say in a chat, if you say, can someone tell me how to start? That's most likely not a very let's say a specific question enough, but very likely you'll see that people are having the same problem, and maybe there are streams there for beginning of implementation. There is or for architecture discussions, all of those things. The good thing about FHIR, so the best thing about FHIR is that community, that you're well supported by people that have gone through this recently or have gone through this a long time ago. Well, not a long time ago, because FHIR is not very old yet. But people are, it's fresh in their minds. People are having the same path as you have. There will be things about compliance, how to be compliant with FHIR. That's one aspect. That's easy to solve. The community will help you there. There will be things about, okay, but how do we roll this out? So the more operational you get, the more you require some internal knowledge, and you require people to say, oh, which server am I going to use? Am I going to use this one or that one? Well, depends if my people are doing Java or .NET or something else. Those questions, they will appear, but you also have support for this. And yeah, so there's the job of making those specifications and testing them and rolling them out. So rolling them out sometimes is the big challenge, because you have to set up the servers, you have to set up all sorts of security, privacy concerns, architecture considerations, all of those things. But again, you are definitely not alone on that one. And yeah, from the side of the people that make specifications, which is mostly my role, we are trying to make that process as easy as possible for you. Let me just tease you, Fazila and the others, with one thing that I don't think I can share, I don't think I can show now, but let's see.
Jose, just as you're doing that, Fazila, this is exciting to hear. And one of the resources I'd like to make sure that you're familiar with and your team are aware of is the Open HIE community itself. All right. And particularly around the FHIR side things, there is a sub-community called the DevOps group. Within that, there is a team of people who are working on a project called Instant Open HIE. The idea around that is to be able to rapidly stand up examples of health information exchange components and showcase their interoperability between it. And we've had the privilege of facilitating funding into that as Digital Square, and those are FHIR aligned. So within that, you'll find there's a client registry, interoperability layer, soon to be facility registries. So just as Jose is talking about, the structure of FHIR and where it's being utilized and talking about the tools and so forth, there are some exciting projects and resources and teams who are working at those components in that space. So if you need any help on that, please do reach out. If you'd like some connections, I don't know if Silvelo's on the call. If you are Silvelo, please put your email in the chat. So I'm on mobile at the moment. But if there are any questions around that particular aspect, I'm happy to talk about it. I wanted to make sure that was in front of you. Jose, back to you.
Thank you. I never know if it's my own. So I'll get to that. That's actually very important, and I will go there. I just wanted to show, but I cannot show it here. I have it somewhere on my machine. I was experimenting with it last week. For example, if you say I want to roll out a server, we are making, so we the FHIR community are making it easier and easier that the setting up of a server is as easy as running a Docker image. So if your people have, if you have the team of infrastructure, they will love to see that, well, if you make the specifications, then we don't have to spend 2 weeks or 3 weeks in coding. We just have to run one command line, one command on the command line, and that's it. So there's lots of facilitation that's happening. And I wanted to show that, to share that, but I don't have it working. But trust me, it's just one command line that we are working on these enhancements as a FHIR community. Now, more specifically, and I'm very happy that Carl mentioned this. I would completely bypass it if you didn't. The most often, the things that you have to define in your country, you will not be the first person ever to have those issues. Maybe you're the first person to have those issues on FHIR, also less and less likely because more and more people are doing this. But for example, if you want to say, I want to set up the international patient summary. Well, as you can see as you mentioned from when you mentioned, the HL7 community has already produced some specifications on the implementation of a patient summary. So you don't have to redo those discussions. You don't have to reanalyze all that. And that is getting more and more the situation for institutions. For SDOs like HL7 and IHE, they produce some generic guidance like how do you do this part, how do you do that part. But also institutions like, so what OpenHIE is doing as a community is to really produce some digital goods that we can say, okay, I want my labs and I want my medication and I want discharge letters. If that's what you want, chances are that you have people that have already put in place the basic considerations of security and the basic architecture decisions. They have already been taken. They may fit your requirements or may not fit your requirements. But the thing is that you already have something that you can experiment. And more they are packaged in a way that it's not just the specs, it's the specs, it's the testing, it's the examples, and it's, there's also some reference implementations out there. OpenHIE has a couple of those things ongoing, the OpenHIM and OpenLab. So there's a couple of acronyms, sorry, I forget them. But there's a couple of reference implementations that you should say, okay, I want to roll this out for me. So I just want the lab stuff. Well, okay, then I take a ready off-the-shelf module of lab. Maybe I still have to customize it. Maybe there's something missing for my own purposes. but it will be really good if you can use, or for me, it would be really good if I can use something that's already off the shelf, validated by lots of effort, so that I don't even have to go to the chat and restart those discussions. Concretely, if you want to do something on lab, well, just use the lab stuff. If you want to do something on the, for example, case reporting, we are working hard on case reporting. And if you have a module for case reporting that fits your needs for malaria, for HIV, for COVID, and for all those things, and if it also addresses matters of security, privacy, and architecture, then maybe you don't need to restart those discussions from scratch. And if you have a server that implements that, so that you can play with it tomorrow instead of waiting 2 years to have a server ready, and I don't think I'm exaggerating. If you start everything from scratch, it will take 1 or 2 years to do something. Depends on how quick you adopt things or not. And if you want to use something that's already available, then if it's available, then you just run it locally, and that it's ready tomorrow. You can still, so within that space, there's lots of things that are already out there available. There's a library of components, library of systems that you can use. And those systems, they come with better interoperability, so that when you connect, for example, a patient identity management system, and you connect this to the lab, that the common things that you have to know about how to plug those in together, they have already been discussed. Maybe they are complete to your use cases or not, but there's already lots of thought behind it and lots of development behind those things. So you're more than welcome to use existing tools and challenge the other authors of those tools, rather than redefining everything yourself. And sorry, as I was, until a few hours ago, I was working on the OpenHIE stuff, and I completely forgot to mention the OpenHIE stuff that we are doing. Maybe because that part of the brain was put aside for a moment. Anyone has challenges? Anyone has more ideas and things that they would like to discuss, please? Or things that people would want a more in-depth session on. So we have these Wednesday sessions once a month that we actually go a bit more in detail. For example, how to make an implementation guide, what is FHIR, what's terminologies on FHIR. Does anyone have any problems that they would like to see developed in a more thorough and specific session? No questions, no ideas? I would like to see what people are doing out there. So, Fazila, I'm happy to see that Malaysia is doing healthcare information exchange. That's really exciting to know, and I will try to follow up on that. Please join the chat and the FHIR chat. And what about others? What are others doing? What are others busy with?
Can I just share my experience? So I'm Dr. Veerbhadra. I'm actually originally from Sri Lanka, though I'm currently in UK. So in Sri Lanka, we are trying to connect a cluster of hospitals and trying to share some services as well as their information. And the overall architecture asks for an enterprise service bus. And there was a sort of a look around to see what are the available solutions. And I think the developers are now trying to go with Mirth Connect or something, which has an open source implementation as well. But I came across some use cases where they have used solutions like Apache Kafka, which can actually share information and probably even function as a ESB in context. I was wondering whether there are any known use cases for use of such, because I think Kafka is more for enterprise use. It has better throughput and stability. And I'm comparing the community version of the Mirth Connect. They have an enterprise version, which I'm sure is very good. But we generally look for open source, solutions in Sri Lankan context. So I was wondering whether the ESB concept now, most of them are now API-driven connections. So will using a ESB be a sort of a outdated concept, or the other thing is what are this sort of ESB solutions available that can be used in a low cost setup like Sri Lanka that has been proven in other places? Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's actually gives me a good excuse to do what I was looking forward to. So first, from my first impression, I know that Mirth Connect is an ESB in the classical sense. I think Kafka is something else. It's, what do they say here? It's a event streaming platform. So maybe it is adequate for RESTful communication, but I do not know if one would be more adequate or not. I'm happy that you asked this question, because this is exactly the kind of things that you would go through a couple of resources. Let me just show you one, and I'll put the links over there. First thing, you go, so the HL7 maintains a wiki with meeting minutes, specifications, some reference pages. So there's a lot of information out there contributed by the community. So if you go here, let me see if I find something on Kafka. And I'm presuming that Kafka is either indeed the last name or...
Jose, do you mind if I jump in while you look up for a second?
Go ahead, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you so much for that question. I think it's exciting to have a look at this work that's gone on. So part of what we also have as Digital Square, just as Jose picks up that information, is we curate a list of existing global goods. Now, and these are open source health technologies that are well aligned to the digital health intervention classifications published by the WHO. And within that space is data exchange and interoperability. So if you have a look at the Global Goods Guidebook, which Verinder will be pasting in the chat shortly, there are some options in there. One most notably is the GEMBI Health Systems Open HIM. And that tool has been in development specifically and bespokely developed for health information exchange that is well aligned with the Open HIE architecture. It runs off a highly scalable backend, Node.js, and very stateless in many of its transactions, and a strong database to keep track of the transactions that are moving through it. Now, when we looked at Mirth, originally it ran on the Mule ESB, which was underneath that engine. So there are some interesting aspects going on there. But something that I would make sure that the technical teams are looking at when investigating an open source health information exchange tool, and particularly an interoperability layer, is not just the throughput of information, but the curatorship and management of that information. And if your architecture is aligning to the idea that an interoperability layer forms a central gateway into a protected health space, then there are a few other things that an interoperability layer should be able to do. And if you're aligning to the IHE space, you're looking at your APNA audit log certifications, as well as some simple things of managing authentication, replaying messages, stripping out sensitive content, and so forth. I'm not sure if we have anybody from GEMBI or experience with the HIM online who wants to chat about that. If not, I'll hand back to Jose to chat through the HL7 side of things.
If we have anyone from GEMBI, please jump in. Yeah, so there is more and more reference implementations out there, and of course the ones that we are looking at, the ones that are open source, that are proven, as in they work, or that they get more and more work behind it, and they work for the purpose that it was supposed to work. So we are building up this architecture of components that can plug in together. And what I wanted to mention is that at any point, just so you can go to the HL7 Confluence page, where we hope also to advertise these solutions, to advertise in the sense that to spread the word about these solutions. And there will always be a community of people in the FHIR chat that you can ask. Maybe someone has asked for Kafka, but I don't remember any big discussions on that. But there is always someone with the same idea. And if it's a good idea, people will pick it up. If it's a bad idea, people will also let you know. So try to, as much as possible, use the power of the community to see what's out there, because maybe. So in this case, before I was just thinking of the FHIR stuff, and I was not remembering the many goods, the many assets that we have in open source. So the OpenHI community, digital square, digital goods, all those things they are out there. You will have some work of finding those out. So the more we can facilitate that, the better. But yeah, sometimes we might forget. So it's always a good idea to just go into the chats or to the forum and say, hey, what can I do here? So this question that you asked, Shaminda, that's a very good question to ask in the community. Sometimes people know it, sometimes people know it and forgot it, sometimes people don't know it, but with the community you'll have a better chance of having everything that you need for moving forward. Having said that, it really depends on your architecture. So as Carl was saying, the moment that you start to use a platform, and it's appealing to use open source basic components, but you'll have a lot of effort in validating things like identity management, audit logs, all those things. They have, chances are that someone has already looked at that. So and that happens to me a lot when I'm doing searches. Sometimes I'm doing things like, how can I connect this component to that component? And I have lots of raw information. At some point I switch off and say, no, wait, I just want to solve patient identity management. And then ask this question, and maybe there's a team somewhere that has done already that. So the search for within the community for the things that you actually want to solve. So if you say, I want to have an ESP, you'll have a type of answers. If you say, I want to connect my modules, considering privacy, considering audit logs for security and access control, all those things, you'll have higher level questions. Not better, but higher level. You have prepackaged solutions, people that have already been looking at this for many years. So I hope that also helps. Oh, and testable systems as well. Testable and tested systems as well, so that you don't have to go through that cycle yourself alone. Shaminda, does that help you? Does that sound helpful?
Yes, thank you so much. Yeah, we'll reach out to the community and see the options, and also direct our developers also to go through it. They'll be having, for specific technical issues, they'll be able to get help from there. Thank you very much for the answer.
One final, not advice, one final self-awareness thing that I would say there is, if you have a problem, chances are, if it's a real worthy problem, it will have, some people will already have thought of this, unless it's an innovation thing. But sometimes by asking the question, you'll realize that, or with the feedback, you'll realize that that's not really the problem that I wanted to solve. So if, for example, you have to say, how can I put all my patients together in one system? Sometimes you might get feedback, that's not what you want to do, because you still have, different authorities, etc., that manage different types of information. This is just a silly example, but asking the questions really helps seeing whether we are even going in the right direction or not. So use that knowledge as much as you can. It will save you a lot of time. Does anyone else have any ideas? Burning questions? Not yet burning questions. I would entertain one more question or one more comment if people are willing to bring it forward, or just one idea, one thing, one request for next chats, for sessions, anything. Then if not, then I would propose something myself, which is in one of our next chats, we will have kind of a inventory of these links and these resources. So we had already a similar discussion a few weeks ago, and more it starts getting interesting to have kind of a beginner's page, or where do I start with FHIR, so that instead of having to listen to me for almost 1 hour, then you just look at the link and say, no, wait, this is about security. Okay, I have these links. So this is about server deployment. Okay, this is what I want. Or here's the videos, or here's the GitHub repositories. We are trying to make an inventory of these tools and knowledge that will help you find information more quickly. I hope that sounds helpful. Okay, then from my side, I think we are done if we don't have any more questions or ideas. Rhonda, over to you.
Sounds good. Thank you. So I just threw in our Google Doc where we collect notes, things like that. If you have resources that you either want to share or would like to see, go ahead and throw those in there. We will go find them. We'd love to hear from you in that to kind of help guide us. And yes, we will have a recording from the session that we will share afterwards. I think parting thoughts is we have our next FHIR session coming up on October 6th. I just pasted the link into the chat for you to register. It will be on FHIR search. We'll start off with the basics and move into advanced FHIR search as well. So we look forward to seeing you all there. And with that, thank you very much. We really enjoyed hearing your questions. Please reach out and please join the FHIR.chat community, and we will see you next time. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, and bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.